rabbis, well, with the announcement, like, yeah, especially, like, if COVID kicks up again. So that's why I was like, yeah.
As COVID is kicking up again.
You're right, there's no if.
There were 3 people at the bar mitzvah that they're okay. Well, two of them, mom and daughter, had it before, and then my friend got it, I think, while she was there, but she might have had it before, too.
Gotcha.
All right. Once Mark returns, we'll get started.
Well, I think you look cute.
So just to let y'all know, I sent out, I know that there were some questions about Jewish attitudes towards LGBTQ issues at large. And so I sent out the conservative movement's page for articles for Responsa. And that's not all of the response the conservative movement has put out, but that's all of the Responsa on interpersonal issues. So I sent out that link to that page, and on that page I gave you some suggestions if you want to look at articles. They're very technical, and like I said last week, if you don't love talking about body parts, not the thing for you to read, but if you're interested in the very specifics of how body parts are involved, both the article on same-sex marriage and with the article on transgender, how transgender Jews fit into the halachic world, they will be pretty explicit. It's also got a whole lot of references to rabbinic texts and to Torah texts and to halachic texts from the Middle Ages. And so if you're reading through and you have questions about any of the Jewish law stuff, please let me know. Because I know that it's difficult. It's a little bit difficult to weed through. It kind of reads through like a legal paper. And feel free to search around the website. It's the Rabbinical Assembly website. There's a lot in there. The other thing I wanted to share was last week I forgot the name of what the party's called for the man before the wedding. So often there are 2 parties that happen before a wedding, before the wedding ceremony. Often there's the party for the men and the party for the women. At our wedding, people could go back and forth, but it was mostly women on my side and mostly men on Feivel's side. I mentioned last week that on the women's side, it's to give blessings. So like women will line up and come to the bride and ask for a blessing. The bride will say something nice. And there's food involved in the whole thing. And on the men's side, the groom gives a Devar Torah, gives some sort of sermon, but the goal for the guests is to get him not to be able to finish it. So they will interrupt him with songs and jokes and personal stories and wedding advice and all of that fun stuff. That is called the so a tish can be either that party before the wedding, or it can just be any sort of party.
Did Feigl make it through his tish?
I don't know. I wasn't there.
I didn't know if he talked about it after.
I don't know. That's a good question for him.
I mean, because, he'll get us back on track from 929. He's like, okay, we need to finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. All I know is that they didn't have enough food on their side, and there was a lot of drinking and not very much food on the men's side. But we had lots of food. And drinks also. But lots of food. Which he was upset about because he took on the lovely custom of not eating for the whole day. A lot of people will fast the whole day before the wedding. And I was having none of that.
You had food.
No way.
Well, because then you have to glad hand until you can finally get the 15-minute locked away to actually eat. That
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I get hangry when I don't eat.
Oh, yeah. Huh?
We made food before coming.
Nice.
So, just gonna tell everybody I got her sick.
You probably did a great job.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
What did you cook?
Crustless pizza.
Ooh. Yeah.
I'm trying this thing because I now can fit into smaller pans.
Ooh.
If you notice, I didn't moon service by accident.
Alrighty, with that, any other questions that came up from last week or from the last week, or since I haven't seen a couple of you in a few weeks or a few months, any questions that have come up since the last time I saw you?
No, was that in the email on the Monday or the links you sent?
The links I sent were just this afternoon.
Oh, okay, so that's why.
I just sent them out earlier today. Great. Now today we are going to talk a little bit about parenting. I know that not everybody in this room is a parent, or even not everybody in this room may ever plan to be a parent at any point in time. That's okay. But most of us are going to have the experience of teaching or of mentoring or of being an aunt or uncle or just being a role model to younger people. And so part of this about parenting. When we're talking about parenting, we can think we be the best role models for those younger than us, and just those around us in general. But a lot of this class will also be introducing life cycle events that we all get to be a part of. So we're going to start out with what it means to be a mensch. And I'm going to do a different table here. So it's a person of quality, the embody of all the positive values that one hopes to imbue in a child. So menschlichkeit is basically doing stuff, when someone does stuff that makes them a mensch. So like what would be some examples of menschlichkeit, something that would make someone a mensch?
An honest person.
An honest person. Somebody tells the truth. Nice.
I always have a bad reaction because, you know, when you learn about World War II and stuff, what's it, the Nazi term for the under people? It's like there was a derogatory term for people. They called them something like the Untermensch or something. I can't forget, but I just remember like mensch. Obviously, it just means man.
Yeah.
But you know, in the context I learned it, I still haven't associated the derogatory way it was used. You know, a lot.
That's interesting.
I've got like
Untermensch?
The Ubermensch, or the like over. I've heard this term before a few times, like because Mensch I think is German as well for man, unless I'm just talking, you know.
Well, usually Yiddish is basically German with Hebrew characters, so.
So that's but that, you know, because I don't know. I know it's a silly association, but I always just think of that term.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, that Menschlichkeit, that's
nice.
Very German.
And Anna's saying a mensch is a trustworthy or reliable, a stand-up person, right? So someone who we can believe, someone we can trust, someone we know that when they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. A stand-up person. I love that. Great. So we've got a few traits of a mensch, some midot. So when we talk about midot, our Hebrew term, midot is a Hebrew term. Yes, so Bryson, it's the noun of being a mensch. Okay? It's the ways in which to be a mensch. So some midot or traits of a mensch. Midot is literally just means traits, but when we're talking about midot, we're often talking about positive traits. I'm curious for each of you to just take a minute to pick what would be the top 3 values that you want to teach those who come after you, or those who you're teaching, nieces, nephews, children, students, little siblings. And then if you look at this list, what is one value that is not here that I think is important? And if you have an answer and you're online, Feel free to type it in the chat. I think reliability wasn't here.
Mine's gone.
What's yours?
Mine's gone. Yeah, that one.
Okay. Reliability.
Can humor and snarkiness be the same thing?
Humor and snarkiness.
I mean, humor is there, but...
Anti-fragility.
Anti-fragility. Which is interesting because I think for many times it's comforting for somebody to be fragile because it means that I can too. Great. So trustworthy, kindness, and integrity are Anna's top 3.
Well, anti-fragility does not mean like not fragile. It's
Kind of grit.
well, it's sort of
Yeah.
Perseverance means staying the same no matter what's thrown at you. Like a rock is persevering, and a glass is fragile. So anti-fragility is even when you break, you come back stronger. So it's more like custard technically. The hardest thing that hits you, you can adapt and change to be better.
So resilience.
No, but better, because resilience you stay the same no matter what happens.
Okay.
So anti-fragility is like, it's a term that isn't in the English language. It's a Talit term from the Black Swan.
Love that. Great. So Anna's saying no to obedience. You're good. So obedience is too often a toxic concept. All right, so we've got gratitude. Oh, here we go. Not everyone is ambitious. Not everyone has certain kinds of intelligence, but being a person of your word and true to yourself and others makes anyone a mensch. That's true, something that anyone can do. Says gratitude, integrity, and patience. Gratitude, integrity, and patience. I love that. Mark, what do you think you don't have to do exactly 3, but you can. Is there anything you would add, or are there ones that seem like your top ones?
Love, loyalty, and humor.
Humor.
Those can make anything go a long way.
You're right. Those can make anything go a long way, especially in those interpersonal relationships and those one-on-one relationships. Great. Were there any ones on there, Emma? You mentioned anti-fragility, but are there any ones on there that stick out to you?
Like everyone, I picked integrity, but then I
Awesome.
just deviated massively to ambition and curiosity.
Nice. Love curiosity too. Wonderful. Jade, are there any that stick out to you or any you would add?
I picked idealism, ambition, and perseverance.
Idealism, ambition, perseverance. Love that. And some of these kind of, they're not counters to each other, but they're different ideas, and I think we can hold both at the same time, right? That we can both be ambitious, but we can also be humble, right? Because humility is here. Right? You can be ambitious, but you can also be grateful to what other people have done for you. So these are just some ideas, and I challenge you to think about how can we not only teach this through talking about it, teach these traits through talking about them, but also how can we live our lives in a way that we're demonstrating that, because really every single person we come into contact with is watching us and making sure that is watching us and in some way internalizing our actions and our speech. There's this concept of Chilul Hashem or Kiddush Hashem. Chilul Hashem literally means desecrating the name of God. Kiddush Hashem is sanctifying the name of God. And the way that it's used culturally more broadly is that Chilul Hashem is when a Jewish person does something that makes the Jewish people look bad, right? So think Bernie Madoff. Think about how the world thought about Jews after Bernie Madoff's whole scandal, right? The way that certain political groups portray George Soros, right, throughout Europe. So Chilul Hashem is either someone making someone's actions out to be making someone's actions out to be a stain on the Jewish people, or someone's actions being a stain on the Jewish people. I first learned about this when I read a news article about sexual assault in Orthodox communities in New York. It was a huge news article, New York Times, making Orthodox Jews look bad, and therefore people in the world who learn about this associate all of us, right, in the same grouping, right? That these rabbis were not letting people in the community speak up, that their communities, if anyone did speak up, especially to the police, that they would have their houses stoned, their kids kicked out of school. So it was a whole scandal, not just in one Jewish community, but in many.
What do you mean by houses stoned?
They would literally have their houses or apartments, like rocks thrown in the windows, or things like that, from others in the Jewish community. Because, ironically, they didn't want all this to go to the police so that their Jewish community wouldn't look bad. But then it all came out. It made us as Jews look really bad.
Not so much that it happened, but the fact that you're trying to cover it up, or that it makes it kind of worse.
Right. And, on the flip side, we've got people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right, who, no matter where you are in this political spectrum, I think, most people are really entranced by her life and by her achievements, right? And she is a person who uses Judaism and talks about Judaism in a way, or was a person who used Judaism and talked about Judaism as a background for her, as a reason why she did a lot of the things that she did. So she is kind of a person who exhibits Kiddush Hashem. Right? Chilul Hashem, Kiddush Hashem, basically, all of our actions have some sort of effect, not just on how we are seen, not just how other people treat those around them, but also about how we as a Jewish people are seen in the world. And so we try to be mensches, for lots of reasons. One, because it's the nice thing to do, right? Two, because we're commanded to be. So a lot of these have their roots in not just morality, in Torah, but three, because everything that we do reflects on our people, on the people that we're close to, and the people we trust. The questions about Menschlichkeit. All right. We're not quite at this section yet, but I would love to share with you a prayer the prayer written for a Simchat Bat, which is a girl's baby naming ceremony, and we'll get to what a Simchat Bat is, but it's a beautiful prayer about what we might wish for our children, for our students, for those who come after us. And I'll read the first little chunk of it, and then we can rotate on who will read the next few. So this is written by Sarah and Catherine Levy for their daughter Mimi. Torah, may you delight in learning and reading and discovery. May you search for what it means to be human. May you search for that which is, was, and forever will be. May you find comfort in tradition and hope in change. May you find hope in ancient wisdom and comfort in new ideas. May you grapple with what it means to be Jewish, asking difficult questions and considering complex answers. community, celebration, Nazi, revolution. May you sing, unless you prefer visual arts, then may you paint. May you paint, unless you prefer to groove, then may you dance. May you dance, unless you seek a harder path in life, then may you write. May you write until you discover that you're really good at math, then may you build. May you build skyscrapers, solar panels, and microscopic medical marvels that will eradicate polio, cancer, and AIDS. May you learn for the sake of learning and share your wisdom with the world. Mark, will you share that paragraph on chuppah?
May you love and be loved and give love. May your life be filled with love, big love, intense love, overwhelming love, the kind of love that comes from family and friends, strangers and neighbors, your communities and colleagues. May you suffer heartbreak, but only once and only for a short period of time, and only to discover you were too good for that jump. May you meet the love of your life, your beshert, someone who feeds your mind, nourishes your soul, and challenges you to be a better person. May you have a family. May you suffer very little, only enough to discover that life has ups and downs, and resiliency is best. May your life be filled with goodness and good food and great people, inspiring conversation, laughter, beautiful sunrises, and transcendent sunsets. May you lose track of time, always. May you be present.
Love that. Emma?
May you dedicate your life to Tikkun Olam, healing the world. May you understand that there is happiness in service and service in happiness. May you have the best of everything, and may you spend your life helping to make sure others can have the best of everything too. May you be inspired by those who work to heal the world before you, your grandparents, great uncles and aunts, teachers, cousins and parents. May you be daring and thoughtful. May you experiment legally and safely. May you be blessed with practical skills like changing a light bulb or unclogging a drain. May you help others change their light bulbs so that everyone may have a home filled with light. May you always create light in the midst of darkness. May you compete and win, and when you don't win, may you be graceful in loss. May you live and love and live and laugh and live, and may each day be a blessing. And may we say amen.
Amen. Wow. All right. This is just one example of what a set of parents wants for their children. Before we move on to the tachlis, to the practical life cycle events, what else might we wish, or is there anything else we might wish for the next generation that hasn't been mentioned in health? Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Trying to think about Torah, Chuppah. So when we, in a lot of the traditional blessings, I love that, tackle the challenges of your specific time and place in the world with determination and optimism. I don't know if optimism was on the list before, but that's a big one.
I struggle with that.
It's hard, right? But a lot of those things that we mentioned before are difficult, right? And yes, it's kind of like that Sabbath prayer song from Fiddler, right? May you, oh no, I forget. I know it says, may you be like Ruth and like Esther. May you be deserving of praise. There we go. Right, exactly. May the Lord protect and defend you. Yes, exactly. So, all right, may you be deserving of praise. May you come to be in Yisrael a shining name.
Because we're forgetting.
We definitely have to watch it again. Fantastic. But absolutely. Not all of these are easy, but I mean, the beginning of a life is a wonderful time to be idealistic because it's a clean slate. Has anyone here been to a baby naming, a Jewish baby naming, or a Simchat Bat, or a Brit Milah? That's a great place to start. Oh, I saw one on Zoom. Great. Is there anything in particular you remember from that, Anna, that sticks out to you? You're okay. Looks good backwards.
Wow, that just goes on from earlier today.
I need to be quiet because I'm just disrupting. Sorry.
You're good. You're good.
No,
So, only that the couple was interfaith and interracial and picked a name that had a meaning in Hebrew and Spanish, which is wonderful. We'll talk a little bit about the meanings of Hebrew names, and for some of us here, for those of us who are choosing to convert to Judaism, we'll have to pick Hebrew names. Or those who might have children in the future might have to pick Hebrew names. And we can talk about what goes into that naming process. A lot of it is memory and family, especially if the couple is remembering people who have come before, right? Whether those people grew up in the same culture that we're in now. So with this ritual of brit or baby naming, the Jewish parents are able to stop, and they're able to take stock of those values that we spoke about, and they're able to reflect on that privilege that they have to instill those values. There's a whole lot of discussion about Brit Milah in the Torah, but it really all comes from this verse in Genesis. Then God said to Abraham, "You must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised." The word covenant means Brit, or the word Brit means covenant, which is why we say Brit Milah, the covenant of circumcision. Brit Milah is specifically for males, although I have known people who have figured out some way to incorporate bloodletting into light bloodletting into a baby naming ceremony or a simchat bat for a girl. But the Brit Milah, there are a couple of things that are pretty standard throughout Britot Milah. One is that it happens on the 8th day, and that's the 8th day counting the day of birth. So let's say that the baby is born on Monday, or Monday afternoon, Monday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Brit Milah happens on Monday. What day of the week would be very difficult for that? Shabbat. But here's something fun. If the moyel, the one who is doing the circumcision performer, if they don't have to travel on Shabbat or anything that's un-Shabbat friendly, the brit itself is actually one of the only times that we can transgress Shabbat prohibitions in favor of another mitzvah. So the mitzvah of Brit Milah, that cutting, actually supersedes the mitzvah against cutting on Shabbat. So
only for that one circumstance, right? You don't
only for that one circumstance.
What about burial? Like, funeral. Could you technically bury on the Shabbat?
I think you could, but they usually don't because then people would have to drive. But also there are a lot of things that are involved that are really not Shabbat friendly, that people just kind of, because you don't have to get a burial done. I mean, you should get a burial done as quickly as possible, but I haven't known anyone halachic to choose a burial on Shabbat, right? And I wouldn't perform a burial on Shabbat because we can always push it one more day with modern technology, with refrigeration. But with a Brit Milah or baby naming, you could have it on Shabbat, but a lot of the times people will push it to Sunday just so that people have a chance to travel, and especially those people who wouldn't feel comfortable traveling on Shabbat. But lots of people have had Britot Milah on Shabbat as well. Just some terminology. A moyel is that the person who performs the brit. The moyel is often, not always often, but not always a Jewish physician. So someone who knows, who does this a whole lot, but uses a very specific technique for Brit Milah, and also the moil is often, but not always, a rabbi, someone who's interested in this particular practice of Brit Milah, but you have to have a lot of training to be a moil. So in Hebrew, moil is mohel, like it's written here, and a female moil is a mohelet. Doesn't happen very often, but more and more today we have women who are becoming mohelot, right? Especially if you've got a woman who's a urologist, a lot of them will know how to do circumcision, and so it's easier to learn the specific process of Brit Milah. Couple of roles that occur in the Brit Milah process, in the ceremony. The sandek is the person whose role is holds the baby while the circumcision is taking place. Sometimes that will happen standing up with the baby on a table or on a stool, but sometimes or most traditionally, it'll happen in the chair of Elijah, Kisei Eliyahu, like is shown here. It's often, a lot of synagogues will have a very fancy chair for this event, I think. I forget where it was. I think we had one in here at some point in time.
It's in the tiny shul, isn't it?
Is it in the tiny shul? Okay.
Well, that's where the bench was with the numbering on it for like.
That's where right.
Where some of the.
We'll do a scavenger hunt after this and try to find it. I think we have one somewhere here. It's a fancy chair, and on that chair, the sandek sits with the baby in his lap. Usually, because one of those circumstances that even in liberal Judaism, it is often quite gendered, because it's that idea of passing down this ritual from generation to generation, right? This one particular physical ritual. So the sandek is often male, but doesn't have to be. And the kivater, or kivaterin for female, is the person who carries the baby into the ceremony. So often the ceremony will start with some singing, and there's a big procession of parents and grandparents with baby, and so kivater and kivaterin are the ones who will carry the baby into the ceremony. And often there are more roles that are added in, but these are kind of the standard roles. Hebrew name. So this goes way beyond Brit Milah or bris, but there are a whole bunch of different ways to choose Hebrew names that are similar to choosing any names. So one way to choose a Hebrew name is through memory, right? So if we're trying to remember somebody who has died in the past, in Ashkenazi customary for us to name after people who have died. In Sephardi custom, it's customary to name after people who are still alive. But regardless, naming after somebody's memory so that that memory lives for a long time, right, to honor them. 2 is biblical and rabbinic figures. So we'll name after a figure in Tanakh or in Talmud or some Jewish story that we really love. So let's say we loved reading, this is not Tanakh or Talmud, but we loved reading Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins when we were little. It's a great Hanukkah book. We might name a son Herschel, right? Or in my brother-in-law's case, a dog, huh?
Or Mordechai.
Or Mordechai. Is that your Hebrew name?
And that's part of it.
So how did you, actually I'm going to give one more example of how we might choose it, and then I'm going to ask about your Hebrew name if you feel comfortable sharing.
I can't remember all of the thing that went in. I actually thought about, can we change it? Maybe.
The answer is yes, but I'm curious what went into yours. But 3 would be a trait that you want to emulate or for your child to emulate. So let's say you love peace and you want to make sure that your child is a peaceful person. You can name them Shlomo or Shlomit or Shalom, any sort of variation of Shalom. If you want your child to be nice. Noach literally means nice or calm. So Noach might be good to name your child, the same as Noah in English. So Mark, what is your Hebrew name?
I don't remember the whole thing, it's my colleague.
Okay.
But I know Mordecai came in there, and I think that was one of the, I think the class kind of came up with it more so than I did.
Nice.
I think it had to do with, because at the other location, I was that one that always made everyone feel welcome, or kind of took care of everyone, or like, oh hey, you're new here, you don't know anybody, well come in the circle and come chat, which is funny because it's kind of the opposite of what I do.
I don't think that's true. I think you bring people to services. You bring people to services. You encourage people to come back. And I think talking about the younger generation too. I think something that you're especially good at is making our younger congregants feel really welcome. Treating them like.
I was a little surprised because Lex asked me for a little honor, and I was like, what?
Yeah, you make them feel like this is home.
But I think that's why they kind of came with it, because I was struggling with picking a name, because, I don't know, to me I don't see all these traits, but all these others are like, no, this or this or this. And
so is that after the character in the Esther story?
I think.
Nice. So you are named Mordecai because of your traits. Traits kind of match up with a figure in a story.
Now there were some that were going through. We did have somebody. She was. What was it? What's the translation? She is something Shoshana.
And Shoshana is a lily or a rose.
Or something is what they.
Maybe Malka Shoshana.
That's it, Malka Shoshana. That's my sister came with when Rabbi Judy's script came over.
Wonderful, great.
And then I can't remember everybody else's, but that was what went into it.
So my Hebrew name is Sarah, and when you say Hebrew name, it's usually Sarah, daughter of, or son of in your case, your parents. So my Hebrew name would be Sarah Bot Shmuel Verachel. If you've converted to Judaism, or if one of your parents isn't Jewish, you might say, I might say Sarah Bat Abraham v'Sarah, or Sarah Bat my father's name and Sarah, or Abraham my father's name, or my mother's name. So it can change, but if you're new to Judaism, it'll always be daughter or son of Abraham and Sarah.
I think that's what it. Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't ever use it. This is probably bad, but.
No, not bad. As long as you've got somebody who's remembering it for you. Right. But you can change Hebrew names, and actually we'll learn more if you attend Lex's Bene Mitzvah coming up soon. They're talking a lot about names, but a lot of people will change names will change Hebrew names if they're going through a period of healing. So if they've been sick and they've survived, they'll add something to their names that means life or healing.
Can add things.
Mm-hmm. Right. You can add things, you can change, and there are specific blessings for that too.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
So changing names in Jewish tradition. I'll give you a heads up about Lex's Devar Torah, that changing names is nothing new in Jewish tradition.
Which is really good for Lex, because Lex is trying to figure out which name works best.
Exactly.
I like that, actually. I'm excited now.
You should be excited. It's going to be fun.
Okay.
It'll be fun. We have someone having their Bene Mitzvah coming up very soon. They grew up here, and the whole community is very excited. So it's in, oh my gosh, less than a month.
Wow. Really?
We got this. You've been preparing. It's going to be fun.
Do you want to take over and tutor for the next month?
I think I will buy.
Alrighty.
I mean, if you leave me some help notes, we can
Great. Pidyon haben is one other thing that we haven't talked about yet. So Pidyon haben is redemption of the firstborn son. We don't often see this. This isn't on this page, but I'll write it out. We don't see this very often because it's very rare.
Did we talk about something like this in 929? Did this term come up?
I don't think so.
I've heard it mentioned
Maybe.
somewhere, and I don't remember why, but it wasn't my last.
You've done a lot of Jewish learning. So Pidyon haben is very fun and exciting. Haben is the redemption of the firstborn son. So way back in the day, there was this concept that that in place of, oh, you know what? Yes, here's why. In place of going back in time to the Exodus, when all the Egyptian firstborn sons were killed, there was this idea that instead of killing all of our firstborn sons as a memory to the incident, we really don't want to do that. We dedicate our firstborn sons to God and to the priestly class, like to the priesthood. But we also don't want to lose all of our firstborn sons, so we can buy our sons back, or we can buy our sons back from the priesthood and make a donation to the priesthood instead. Now, no priestly class anymore. Right? So what do? So firstborn sons, we'll have this fun little ceremony where the Kohen in the community, or a Kohen in the community, we only have one here now, and he's 91. The Kohen in the community, I don't know if you've met Bernard.
Bernard, yes. Bernard and Dorothy.
Yes, Bernard and Dorothy. He will take a very small donation that he'll later give to the synagogue, but he'll take a very small donation and say some words in after the baby has been around for 30 days, and it's a sign of redeeming the firstborn from the temple. Now, this isn't done very often, one, because it's a very, it's a little archaic, even though I think it's fun, because, like, what a cute little ceremony, especially if your Kohen is 91 years old.
Yes.
But also because firstborn son, halachically, means that it's the firstborn son of the mother, right? So it doesn't have to do with the father. If the mother has any other children before that, doesn't count. So firstborn son of the mother. If she's had any children before then, regardless of gender, doesn't count. It is if the mother has had any miscarriages or any pregnancies before then, doesn't count. And also the son has to be born vaginally. So this ceremony takes place when it's a natural birth, firstborn child of the baby with no other pregnancies or children from the mother beforehand, on the 30th day of life. One other thing I didn't mention about Hebrew names is that traditionally we actually don't share the Hebrew name of the child until that day.
After they've been in an official week?
After they've been alive for an official week, at the Brit Milah, it's often the first time we hear the Hebrew name. And that is, and for many families, the first time we hear the name at all. So, for example, God willing, in November, when I have a Brit Milah or a Simchat Bat or a Brit Bat, we're not going to share the name of the child until then. So no Facebook announces with introducing so-and-so, right, until the 8th day. Right? A Brit Bat or Simchat Bat is the ceremony that we do for the ceremony that we do for girls when they are born. This great modern innovation, there are fewer halachic requirements because this was not often something that was done. It was, in the olden days, the parents would come up to the bima on Shabbat for an aliyah, and there would be this nice little short blessing, and voila, that was the celebration, right? But Now, in more modern times, we've come up with really beautiful rituals to celebrate a Simchat Bat, based on those values that we wanted to keep or to promote. So things that I've seen before are things having to do with dipping her feet in water, because water is that symbolization of Torah. You're not happy with that one?
No, is it all?
Huh?
Is it all?
Is that all?
Yeah.
No, so sometimes they'll also, another one, I've seen things done with candles. I've seen things done with wrapping her in a talit and having a big talit wrapping ceremony. There are a lot of things that are said, blessings that are said, poems that are read, and usually in both a brit bat and a brit milah, the parents will give an explanation of why they chose that Hebrew name for them and what they wish for their child. Me too. And what I've also seen is that your family members who are holding the corners of the talit, someone in the middle who's holding the baby, and then with each corner that they fold in, they say a verse of Torah for how they want that child to be presented in the world. I've also done this with boy babies who physically can't get a brit milah, who can't have circumcision yet.
Some of those in 929, I think, on reasons why they couldn't do it. Isn't there a special? Are they? It's it doesn't matter.
Religious orders and the urethra, if it's in the wrong place, well, I forget the name of it. When the urethra comes out in the wrong place, it probably would.
Or for bleeding, or for bleeding issues. So like my
hemophiliac. That's
right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So my nephew, he eventually was able to be circumcised, but he had some blood issues at the beginning of childhood. And as we've said before, pikuach nefesh, saving a life, is more important than almost any other mitzvah. So that supersedes having to do it on the 8th day.
I remember we discussed it in 929 a few sections back.
Nice.
Wow,
Wonderful.
memory. Ooh,
You have a good memory.
It's failing me.
No, you're doing a good job.
You're learning.
All right. Questions, comments, concerns about brit milah or brit bat? We're not done yet, but anything about what we've shared so far? One thing that we have not talked about so far is why in the world would we do a brit milah or circumcision? Why in the world would we do that? What are the reasons behind it, and do you agree or disagree? If you were to have a child with that particular genitalia, would you do a brit milah or not? So we are going to take about 5 minutes, and in those 5 minutes, we're going to read on our own those 2 pages. In my book, it says it's page 202 and 203. On page 202, there are 2 different opinions on whether or not to do circumcision, and then on 203, there are a few more medical explanations about circumcision. So I'll give us about 5 minutes. We'll come back at 8 o'clock, and then we'll discuss why would we still practice circumcision today, and we still practice circumcision today. Why circumcision? Why would we perform a circumcision on a baby boy? Or if you're a fan, oh, because God said so. That's always part of the right answer.
That is. Then we did discuss that aspect of it in 1909
Mm-hmm.
about it being the covenant and people splitting off but having to come back.
Right. It's literally when we talk about making a covenant in Jewish law, the word is literally to cut a covenant, and so it's a sign of the covenant.
But there's also, the article said, and even before the article, there was also a lot of health benefits.
Mm.
Easier to keep clean and cut down on infections or, various other things that are lingering around out there. So
Great health benefits for sure.
Since we have to do the ISIS freezing my mouth, do catheters in England, I will also say it's really hard to do it on old man penis without them being circumcised. I'm sorry, it's like the foreskin, people's skin gets
Interesting.
wrinkly.
Yeah.
That happens, it's like the foreskin becomes. I'm just saying, it's a slight benefit, but the poor resident that is trying to stick a catheter, find the
there's a lot of health
Sorry,
benefits.
yeah,
apparently.
I'm literally doing this gesture.
So great. So if the baby merits to live till they're old enough to get wrinkly, it's a lot easier to do medical procedures on them.
Because also, if you pull it back and if you don't push it back where it was, it can
Lovely. All right. I think that's a good amount of detail.
Sorry.
You're
Leave
good.
it to the physician to get
to be like, yeah.
Never had a medical student in this, or a doctor.
New experience, right?
Yeah. You're a resident, right? So you finished med school a while back.
But in England, we had to do the catheters, and they have to do that in New York. So just I remember having to call another resident to help me. He had to peel and push everything back because I was trying to catheterize the foreskin in 10 minutes. Poor guy.
Lovely.
Sorry.
Lovely. All right. Other reasons why we might do circumcision. We have the medical. We have God said so. You said something also, Mark, about setting us aside from other people. Right? One of the reasons we knew, or one of the reasons we think that Pharaoh's daughter knew that Moses was Jewish was
due to the circumcision.
Due to the circumcision.
That's what I remember specifically.
Oh.
And here I thought it was,
All right. How about, why might we not want to do circumcision? Does anybody want to play devil's advocate here?
Obviously, in the modern time, you never know. Your kid might go, actually, I'm Hindu.
Okay.
I don't know the specific opinions of circumcision, but in theory, they might join a religion where it's like, you can't tattoo, you can't bodily modify. And they might go, but you bodily modified me. There probably is a religion that has that sort of tenet.
So to allow them to make some different religious choice, it can cause pain to the baby, and it's not medically necessary.
There are some parents that are thinking of the child when they grow up, the sexual health. They say that one circumcised has a harder time, while there are some benefits in some areas, there are other areas that are problems that can arise from it now.
Climaxing. So
Right.
I'll be the doctor.
So there are both medical benefits and drawbacks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just benefits. Like Anna said, it can cause pain to the baby. It's not medically necessary. I'd also say consent. You're causing pain to the baby without the baby's consent because they're not time when they can make that.
That's a relatively new concept, right? Then consent meant something completely different,
right.
Or it wasn't a thing.
Right. Do you have any thoughts, pro or con, Jade?
Just looks nice.
It looks nice.
Just cosmetically.
Great, cosmetically. Great, that's another pro.
Sure.
Fantastic.
It smells nicer. There's a smegma.
Okay.
too.
So
Yeah.
cleaner.
Yeah.
Smackverse, the medical term for the cheesy deposit you get.
Lovely.
That comes
I'm
back to
learning
health,
so
though.
much.
Well, also smell and appearance.
And how does that make you feel?
Right. Smell, appearance, cosmetics, aesthetics. Great. Those are all pros, but I would imagine there would be cons for some people as well.
I would
That's
never.
true.
I've never smelt it up close, but I don't think I would enjoy the smell of smackverse.
Lovely. Wonderful.
Sorry.
I learned so much about the human body every time we have this class.
If you want to kind of like cuss, say smeg. You know, you like kind of
Sure.
pick that up from Red Dwarf.
But I really can see parents where they're coming from, where the argument,
Mhm.
why do I have the right to modify my child's body? Which we kind of covered that already.
Yeah.
But there can be some guilt associated with that. I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah. There can be some guilt associated with that. Why do I have the right? Absolutely. I think another.
Which the text did cover it because I think when we were younger, at one point it was considered a requirement. Like when a child was born, now it's considered cosmetic surgery.
And also, so insurance, depending on your insurance, it'll cover it differently. So it can cost money.
Insurance would cover it in the beginning whenever they were thinking everything was necessary. But now that it qualifies as cosmetic surgery, I want to say in some cases, I've had friends like say, oh, well, I didn't get one because my parents said it was cosmetic surgery, insurance didn't cover it. I even think, well, I don't want to throw their business out there. But,
Right. Right.
I can throw an interesting caveat because I was recalling I did watch like an orchidectomy or something like about the urethra. I forget the name now. The urethra was coming out the wrong side. It was coming out the edge of the penis or something. So that's when I learned that if you as a male have, this is England, so we don't circumcise as standard unless you have any surgery on the penis, because post-surgical complications are much better. So they were restructuring the urethra. So they that would be a situation where they'd be like not so much cosmetic because the infection is like because you've done all this other stuff.
Right. Absolutely. Right. So there are lots of reasons for and against, but halakhically, we do circumcise children with certain genitalia at 8 days. If we're not able to do 8 days, it's okay to push it. And when somebody's in the conversion process, we make sure, as mentioned before, if they haven't had a circumcision, then they'll have a circumcision during the process. If they have, then they do what's called Hatzafat Dam Brit, which Dr. Spall mentioned in that article. It's scarier than it sounds, or it's way less scary than it sounds, is what I meant. And just use a diabetic needle. And when we do it here, Rabbi Feibel stands outside the room, hears the guy say, ow, and then, oh, that wasn't so bad, and then we move on, right? 2-second procedure.
Is there a reason why it's done more, say someone converts, reform, is that not something that is taking place, or does it just depend on the rabbi's personal preference?
Right, so in Reform Judaism, totally the conversion process and also what they do for birth rituals totally depends on the rabbi's personal preference. So Reform and Reconstructionist Judaism.
I'm just kind of wondering for our conversation.
Right. So in some Reform and Reconstructionist synagogues, when we're talking about the conversion process, the rabbis do require that their students go through mikvah and Beit Din and Brit Milah, but not all do, right? Okay. Some rabbis will have a month-long process. Some rabbis will hand you a certificate and say, here, you're Jewish. But in the conservative movement, Orthodoxy, and many other rabbis who make that choice, will go through mikvah and Beit Din, and for those who need it, Hatzafat Dam Brit or circumcision. But again, different streams of Judaism are going to have different qualifications for that. So total side note, I have a friend in England who's actually coming over the high holidays, so you'll get to hear her lovely voice.
Coming.
She is.
Oh, good.
It's going to be really hard to lead 15 hours of services while pregnant, so she's gonna come and help out. But she's a rabbi in England. She actually converted to Judaism, and so a lot of her rabbinate is helping people convert in England. In the Masorti movement, which is the parallel movement to conservative Judaism in England and in Europe and really the rest of the world, they actually require that Jews, they watch the kind of halachic practice that Jews are doing. So they'll make sure that that people who are in the conversion process are not dating anybody who's not Jewish. They'll make sure that...
Because that makes things complicated.
Yeah. No. Make sure that that you're keeping kosher, that your kitchen is kosher, so they'll watch you kosher your kitchen. They'll make sure that you're keeping Shabbat and count the amount of times that you come to synagogue. And some synagogues in the U.S. will do that, some conservative synagogues, but it's more standardized in Europe. So it totally depends, even in the conservative and Orthodox movements, depends who your rabbi is,
Okay.
what the conservative or what the conversion process is going to look like.
Yeah, I remember you did warn me that the conservative process here wouldn't count to the conservative Jewish process.
They would probably honor it. They would probably honor it in England, but if you were going to go to England to finish the process, then there would be a whole lot of other things to do. So, which when Natasha comes in the fall, you can learn from her. Sorry, Rabbi Natasha. Great. Other.
Now I'm gonna have a hard time because every time you mention Rabbi Natasha, I'm gonna think of this choreographer from gymnastics, and she's very like stern. So I'm gonna be like,
good to know.
When you say it, if I drift off and go da 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 da, nah, I'm like, okay, never mind.
Well, she's definitely not a dancer, and she's not so strict. So, you're okay. You're okay. All right. Other questions, reflections about any of these baby ceremonies, or even the ceremonies that might happen later than when we're babies? Great. Let's move on to something exciting. We're going to talk about Bene Mitzvah. So, Bot Mitzvah is for a girl. Bar Mitzvah is for a boy. And then, now in our world of gender non-binary students, especially among middle schoolers today, we have lots of different possible names for what we might call a bar or bat mitzvah for somebody who's gender non-binary. So, for example, coming up...
How do you spell it? Is it B?
There are two different spellings for the word bene, which is the plural of bar or bat, because remember, we might have talked about this before, plural in... I heard about that episode of Sex and the City with Charlotte's non-binary child, with the they mitzvah. I love that. So that's another option, is a they mitzvah.
When is it a what now?
Let's Bene Mitzvah first. So Bene Mitzvah is the plural for bar bat mitzvah, but we also have a they mitzvah, which basically means the same thing as a bene mitzvah. The EI and AI are just different ways of transliterating. You're going to see it in lots of different ways at Lex's upcoming Bene Mitzvah. So it's spelled in different ways in each document.
Okay.
So just so you know,
So I'm not confused.
some people will call it a B mitzvah or a B mitzvah, because literally that would mean in a mitzvah, which isn't so wrong. Some people will call it a Brit Mitzvah, which means the covenant of a mitzvah, or covenant of mitzvah. My problem with Brit Mitzvah is but it's a beautiful name if we are aware of the Hebrew. Are there other names that you've heard for a non-binary bar bat mitzvah?
No, because that's just something that I'm just now hearing recently.
So throughout the Jewish world, there's, just as for a girl's baby naming ceremony, there are 5,000 different names. There are 5,000 different names of what a non-binary bar bat mitzvah might be called. And there's not yet consensus, right? There's also not yet consensus for, well, do we keep calling boys and girls bar bat mitzvahs bar mitzvah or bot mitzvah, or do we standardize and call everybody's bar bat b'nai they mitzvah the same thing? So there's a lot of discussion about that.
Is Hebrew a gendered language?
Mm-hmm.
It is, okay, because that's a condition I've heard, that a lot of Latinos are quite offended by Latinx because their language has two genders, so they're kind of like,
Yeah,
it's
like that in French, everything's masculine or feminine.
Well, so like in Spanish, I don't know, like French
is also masculine and feminine.
But like in Spanish, when something is, there are really two genders in Hebrew. So one gender is female, and the other gender is everything else, right? So that's why I don't like to call God he, because the that we use for God can also be used for any object we don't know the gender of, or any person we don't know the gender of. Right? Kind of neutral.
What do you use in its place? What do you use?
I just use God.
God, okay.
Or if I want to be fancy, the Holy One, or the Eternal, or any other name for God.
I couldn't remember. I know when we get to the prayer books, I have a bad habit of reading my autocorrect.
You're good, though. It's not incorrect to say he, but it's also not incorrect to say a different pronoun. Because like in Spanish, when you pluralize the male, that encompasses male and female, and whatever other genders might be present.
Sorry, they're plastic.
So why don't you take off the lid and...
Oh, because it's smoothing.
It's probably too...
It's just gotten to the low part and it pulled my tongue in.
Oh yeah, the straw is tricky.
I see.
It's tricky because, like, if you read Bram Stoker's Dracula, you see very different, because he used to just be the normative term if you didn't know the gender in English. So there wasn't any, you would just call he if you just saw shadow. You'd always say he, but people wouldn't know. You would just think, I don't know the gender. But like, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and he was calling children it, and it was so like displaying the it to the kid.
Yeah.
Because the character didn't know the gender, so it was just the norms of what was normal. Like, if you call someone it today, it's an insult. Right,
exactly. All right, I bet that more people here have been to a bar bat mitzvah than to a... Has anyone else here had a bar bat mitzvah? I don't know if Anna has.
I've been to a few since I've been over here. Just going to day-to-day service, but I think this is my first one here where I think we're going through the whole...
Right. So what do you remember from a bar bat mitzvah that you've been to?
So I remember that the service is pretty much entirely led by the bar bat mitzvah or Bene Mitzvah. The rabbi is usually there to help out, but they give is it Devar Torah?
Mm-hmm.
There's a part where they're kind of thanking friends and family and everyone that had a part in it. And then I think at the end, and I may be getting this mixed up, was it guilt that we toss?
Oh, tossing candy.
Tossing candy, not guilt.
Great.
That's a Hanukkah term, isn't it?
Right, because we want Torah to be sweet. So we toss candy at the bar bat mitzvah student or the B'nai Mitzvah to encourage them to study more Torah.
I remember that part because I was visiting B'nai Zion. The lights in there look like bowls.
Yep.
And they make the joke every time. Okay, toss it gently and don't throw it in the bowls.
Right. We often will use, they have these sun-kissed gummies that are great to use because they're kosher and they're very soft. Great. So candy tossing.
Oh, I saw some. Oh no. Second. Being spooked. It was J.J.
Right. Anything else we've seen or experienced at a bar bat mitzvah? Great. So I'll explain a little bit about what a bar or bat or Bene Mitzvah is. And also, side note, there's also an argument to, because Hebrew is gendered but male is kind of the catch-all, there is an argument to just calling all Bene Mitzvah a bar mitzvah, but there is kind of like, there's a gendered assumption in there, which is why we usually don't do that with a non-binary child.
Because I've noticed selects will always thank you in the middle of, in passing or when we're studying or something, when you don't get gender specific, Lex always makes sure to say, thank you for considering me. It's the cutest thing ever.
They're pretty great.
Yes.
All right. So what is a bar or bat mitzvah? So somebody doesn't have a bar or bat mitzvah. Big misconception. Oh wait, we have a comment, I think. Tangentially related question, is the tradition of girls having a bat mitzvah relatively new one? My mom and my aunt said they didn't get one in the 60s and 70s because girls didn't have them then. Yes, absolutely. It's a relatively new one. And what's cool is that in a lot of Orthodoxy, women have started to have Benot Mitzvah or Bat Mitzvahs, even in the Orthodox community.
That was a good question because I remember Naomi Levy wrote something in this book, but in one of her books, Einstein and the Rabbi, she's got a chapter where she talks about she always wanted to be a rabbi as a child, but everybody basically was like, haha, that's not for girls.
Right.
And then she studied a lot of Hebrew and Torah with her father because they weren't allowed to learn. And then when it came time for her to do a bat mitzvah, there were certain things she was not allowed to read from the Torah, but she was allowed to recite certain prayers and do things. So her father, she and her father, tag teamed.
Right. So the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, who also considered himself a conservative rabbi for most of his life, Mordechai Kaplan, his daughter, in I think the 30s, was the first woman to have a bat mitzvah, but they didn't really become standard until the 60s and 70s. I know that my dad said his class was the first class he must have been 76 was when he had his bar mitzvah, or 75. His was the first class in his Reform synagogue for to have Benot Mitzvah. And then my mom, who went to a conservative synagogue, said that the year after her, which would have been 77, was the first class to have Benot Mitzvah. And I believe here they started in the 70s as well. That was around the same time also that in Reform and Reconstructionist Judaism, women rabbis were starting to be ordained, and it wasn't until 85 that in the conservative movement they were. And we'll see similar trends in different religious traditions as well. So like Episcopalian women were allowed to be priests in the 70s and 80s as well, and similar liberal strands of Christianity as well. So it was really the 70s and 80s that all of that came to be. Great. So when we talk about have a bar or bat mitzvah, we're often talking about either the ceremony or the party, but a person is a bar or bat mitzvah or becomes a bar or bat mitzvah upon reaching the age of 13 or 12 for girls because of different definitions of different halachic definitions throughout the text. So it's really when these kids start to hit puberty, on average, about 12 for girls, about 13 for boys.
Now the pandemic though it's made a few changes. Is that like a temporary thing, or will we see?
Well, so someone can have a bar bat mitzvah ceremony at any time,
Okay.
but once a Jewish person reaches 12 or 13, whether or not they have a ceremony, they are, so bar means son, bat means daughter. They are a bar or bat mitzvah once they reach that age of 12 or 13, automatically, no ceremony needed. Right?
Oh, so it's kind of like a quinceañera in that it's more the marking.
Right, in a
of it.
quinceañera, you're still 15 whether or not you have a quinceañera, but
Exactly.
but it's the life cycle event, right? So I love how he says here, earning the privileges and assuming the responsibilities of adult membership in the Jewish community. What that really means is halachically, that's when they're responsible for all of their mitzvot, right? Of course, they're going to continue making mistakes. I make mistakes every day, as probably everybody at this table does, except for maybe a couple of you who are perfect. But they're going to continue making mistakes, but it's their responsibility. They assume responsibility for their mistakes after that period of time. Right? So halachically, they are bound to fast on Yom Kippur and light Hanukkah candles and all of those fun things. Up until this point, they were learning opportunities, right? And things you did with family.
Cheeto even loves to light Hanukkah candles.
Good.
They fascinate her. She's just like...
They're shiny. But the bar mitzvah is what we often talk about when we're saying have a bar or bat mitzvah. So this is when the child demonstrates their acceptance of adult communal responsibilities by, like you said, Mark, leading the community in prayer, chanting from Torah and Haftarah, and depending on the synagogue and depending on the kid's, how much the kid knows, the amount of prayer leading and the amount of Torah and Haftarah that they're reading is going to be totally different. So, for example, I've done 3 Bene Mitzvah at this synagogue so far. I've officiated at 3 Bene Mitzvah. Ivy led the entire service, almost from beginning to end, all of the Torah, led one aliyah of Torah and all of the Haftarah. Right? Cadence led the Torah service and read some Torah. She didn't get to Haftarah. Lex is going to lead the Torah service, read Torah, and then do a little bit of Haftarah.
Okay.
Right? And so it's going to be totally different depending on the kid and on the congregation. Most B'nai Mitzvah will deliver a Dvar Torah, so we'll give a speech. And then,
Do it twice? For cadence, did they do 2 days or 1 day?
Yeah, so she did Friday night. She led some of the prayers, as will Lex.
Okay.
And then Cadence also, for her Bot Mitzvah project, wrote a little speech about why that mattered to her. So when I'm leading a bar Bat Mitzvah, I always try to look at what is this kid's strength? What do they enjoy doing? And make that really the highlight of what we're doing. So I orient what we're accomplishing to that kid's strengths and to their interests. Right? So for Cadence, it was talking more about her personal reflections.
Okay.
Right? And it's also a time to wear sacred swag. So Talit, putting on Talit for the first time.
Ah, that is very important. I
Yeah.
didn't think about that because I did that after conversion.
Nice.
But yes, that is the one thing that everyone looks forward to, is finally being able to put on the Talit.
Yeah, finally being able to put on a Talit. And then if we're on a weekday, they'll put on tefillin. There aren't many B'nai Mitzvah done on weekdays, but you can do it on a weekday, especially if you're on a Monday or Thursday morning is a good time for Torah reading. So if you want to have a very small B'nai Mitzvah ceremony, then that's a great time to do it. Is in the morning and you can wear tefillin for the first time.
Still haven't gotten into that.
It's not easy. Not easy to wear tefillin. All right. Also at the bar bat mitzvah ceremony, as you had said, Mark, there's often tossing candy after the reading of the Torah or Haftarah. And then the bar or bat mitzvah party, right? Middle school party meets ancient communal celebration, and these customs vary. Really important to know, because wherever in the country or wherever in the world you're having a bar or bat mitzvah or a b'nai mitzvah, it's going to be a little bit different. So here at Agudath Achim in Shreveport, where they don't happen very often, b'nai mitzvah don't happen very often, the focus is really on the ceremony itself, and we have a big lunch afterwards, and sometimes they'll have a party in the evening, but not always. And in other places, like Los Angeles or New York or Chicago, there will be a huge party, like wedding-style, ginormous party with a band or a DJ and tables and decorations and, extravagant amounts of money spent, right? So huge party in a lot of other places, but I haven't seen that as often here. That's not so much the custom here. It's more focused on the service
think
itself.
back to
I think of quinceañera as kind of that sort of vibe.
Hmm.
Well, obviously,
Right, exactly. They wear an actual wedding dress.
I think of Mayim Bialik. There are pictures from her Bot Mitzvah.
Mhm.
She said that they kind of went out and made it like a turquoise under the sea type theme.
My bat mitzvah had a dog theme, and each table was a dog-themed table, going along with your conviction that I'm the most dog-obsessed person in the world. That's nothing new. It was Sydney's Best in Show, and I had a big sign.
I love
That's
it.
so
cute.
Yes.
Right? So, and my brother's bar mitzvah last weekend, it was, even though it was in Boise, Idaho, everyone was coming from big Jewish communities. So, the service was a big deal. We had so much family there that it was standing room only in the synagogue, because the synagogue was about our size, and there were too many people in the room. So standing room only for the synagogue service. But the night before, kind of like you would do a rehearsal dinner, we had a big dinner at a local restaurant, and then the night after the bar mitzvah, we had a big party with the DJ, and they played silly games and had props and had a little ice cream cart there, and like fancy salads and food and all of that fun stuff. So it was a big deal party. So depending on where you are, bar bat mitzvah parties, b'nai mitzvah parties are going to look very, very different. Yeah. Right. And I think there are reality shows out there about the most ridiculous, extravagant b'nai mitzvah parties.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
There was a movie. There was a movie that came out recently about competing bar mitzvah parties, who would have the most fancy one. There's a whole lot.
Really?
I actually think it kind of wraps up into like prom culture in America. That's not like a thing, because like how prom cultures become like Sweet 16. They like show off, like it's competitive
see,
and how it
Yes.
Everyone,
Yeah.
I gotta do the next big thing, and
Right.
I'm like, just enjoy your time and stop trying to.
And it seems to be specifically with girls, like the parents
Hmm.
focusing on the. At least
So that's not always the case with b'nai mitzvah, but it's just good to know that if you're in depending on what Jewish community you're in, b'nai mitzvah is going to look a whole lot different. What's a lot more often the case here is that we'll have a big lunch. Sometimes it's even a catered lunch, or like I know that in Tyler, a lot of times the family will cook all of the food for the b'nai mitzvah, which I think the Austins are doing.
I forgot about the bar Bene Mitzvah. People also tend to give them give gifts
Yes.
in honor of someone or to the person, but I forget. Is it in Chai?
So they'll often give gifts in Chai. So Chai, I think I've shown this before, but Chai in Hebrew is Chet and Yud. Chet equals 8 in Hebrew. Yud equals 10. So 8 plus 10 is 18. So people will tend to give gifts in multiples of 18. So let's say $180 or $18 or $36 or $72, right?
Right.
So I'm terrible at math, but I know lots of multiples of 18 because of Chai.
Right. I forgot all about it until I was watching JBS one day, and they're like, for a generous gift of double Chai, and I'm like, what?
Right.
Okay.
Oh wow, I didn't realize what time it was, but we'll keep going. If you do need to leave, no judgment, but we'll keep going for a little bit. So I think gifts are a big thing. Is usually they'll ask for gifts, and then also, or they won't ask for gifts, but it's customary to bring a gift. Not to the synagogue because we don't tend to give gifts Shabbat, but also a lot of B'nai Mitzvah will donate a percentage of their proceeds to some organization, or as part of their B'nai Mitzvah, they'll do a project at a local organization. So, for example, Cadence volunteered at the Gingerbread House locally. Gingerbread House is a center locally that works with women, with young women or girls who have experienced sexual assault.
Okay.
Or any abuse. And
just at home, Gingerbread House is a dog parlor.
Not a dog parlor. But she helped out there. She volunteered there and collected toys and office supplies for them. So often there will be a drive or somewhere to donate or.
Sophia hasn't done hers yet.
Not yet. No, okay. Sophia's got hers in September.
Okay. I knew she was preparing.
Mm-hmm. And then we don't have any B'nai Mitzvah for a very, very long time. All right. For now. You could always, anyone in this room could have B'nai Mitzvah. But I kind of see the conversion process as a bar bat mitzvah process because you're doing all the same amount of learning and going through all of the steps, right? And
I have to really brush up on the Bema effect before doing anything like that.
All good. You have time. All right. Why 13? By Ed Feinstein, the best homiletic person ever, the person who's great at the greatest at giving speeches, which did not rub off on me, talks about the meaning of 13. And this is longer in your book, but I love this explanation of a few examples of why 13 for boys. Right? Aside from puberty, one thing to mention about puberty, when you go to a bar mitzvah, often it is expected that the boy's voice will crack. It's a little bit awkward, but it just shows what time of life we're celebrating, right? So it's seen as common, right? So 13 is recognized as the beginning of a new phase of moral and spiritual life, according to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is a midrash about 0 to 300-ish of the Common Era. 13 was the age at which Abraham smashed his father's idols. There's a midrash that Abraham decided that he was no longer polytheistic. I'll see you next week, Mara. Shavua Tov, have a great week. So 13 was the age when Abraham smashed his father's idols. That was the time when he said, I am no longer polytheistic, I now believe in one God. So he smashed all the idols. It was at the age when Jacob and Esau separated, Jacob to a life of Torah and Esau to the practice of idolatry. 13 is the age that Leah was when he and his brother Shimon attacked the people of Shechem to avenge their sister. And 13 was the age at which Bezalel gained the artistic skill to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Each of these images is remarkably suggestive. And so on your own time, you're welcome to look at those. But 13 really has quite a lot of implications. 13 was also the age that Ishmael was when he got circumcised. All right, what's surprising?
Oh, nothing surprising.
Just keeping awake?
My nights are keeping well.
How fun.
Yeah.
All right. So just a little bit of insight on the meaning of 13, but really realistically, it's that average age of adolescence, for boys at least. And now a lot of the tabernacle.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I was like, we've heard that a lot.
Bezalel was the head artist. All right. And just to wrap up a little bit, how do we teach children about our Judaism? Formally, we've got Jewish education in schools. So there are Jewish preschools in a lot of bigger cities. There are Jewish preschools. There are day schools, which are full 9 to 3. They're private schools that teach Jewish curriculum. There are supplementary schools, which is what we have in Shreveport. We have religious school on Sunday mornings, and then we do Hebrew Sunday afternoons and Wednesday afternoons.
Oh, okay.
So it's in many
And
other
then you did
religious
it on
traditions.
Sunday. I didn't realize you did it on Wednesday as well.
Yeah. There are also a ton of summer camps. I went to some Jewish summer camps. I went to one Jewish summer wilderness camp in Canada, in the middle of nowhere in Canada. So they've got summer camps, they've got youth groups, service trips to whatever countries, and lots of Jewish tourism. So lots of trips to Israel, to Poland, lots of places around the world.
Yeah, I did have caller the other day, and
If we go.
I did have a caller the other day, and she was asking like, "Hey, have you ever been to Israel?" You know, talking about visiting and various other things. So like with this new job, I'm starting to hear other people's take on things too.
Yeah, great. All right, and so just as a last question, for the people here, I know that some of us were raised Jewishly, and some of us may be Jewish mentors or parents in the future, or will be Jewish mentors or parents in the future. So we didn't mention that we might that we might pass on that Judaism from generation to generation.
I mean, well, one thing's kind of easy here. Well, with me, my nieces, I didn't realize how observant they are. I wear my Star of David. And they were younger. I really lived it out. But when they got a little older, because of some complications with my brother, I started tucking it in. Well, it opened a conversation about it, because they were like, "We don't care. Why do you keep tucking it in?" I was like, "Well, it's more because I just don't feel like dealing with your dad." But that has caused them to start being the little inquisitive things that they are.
Nice.
So that sparked one.
Great. So wearing Jewish stuff. So wearing a Star of David
or like
on a necklace.
Or I forget it every
Or if
time.
you've been to a Jewish camp or on a Jewish trip, like wearing a T-shirt to show that that's your Judaism, right?
The other thing that we do here, we have a mezuzah fixed on the doors, and I think it's custom that when you walk through, you're supposed to, kiss.
Yeah.
Sometimes even your non-Jewish friends, if you haven't had walking in, that's just enough to be like, hey, that's not something I see every day. What is this about?
So making your home look Jewish,
right?
And also bonus, it's a mitzvah.
It is a mitzvah, yes.
To put a mezuzah up.
And then of course Hanukkah comes around and you put the menorah in the window, and even my neighbors, they were like ultra Catholic, but they loved the 2 years I was at my apartment because we had tall windows like this, and they loved seeing my it's blown glass, stained glass, but they love to see how the candle would reflect in the window and then make the menorah or the Hanukkah light up a little.
If you remember from Pesach, for Passover, a lot of the weird things we do in the Passover Seder, we do so that kids are going to ask questions, right? And you're demonstrating that you put up a mezuzah or you wear Jewish stuff just so that kids kind of...
Is that why traditionally in Passover, because this is my first time that I've really been to a first and second night Seder where everything was pretty much done, is that why the kids sing the song
the 4 questions, yeah.
The 4 questions. See, I'd never seen that done back at home, so that was kind of cool. Because just right before we did it, Avenue posted a video with children doing it.
Oh,
and I heard the songs, and Ivy was singing it. And then I went, oh, that's a familiar tune.
Yeah.
But
there you go.
I'm sorry, I hogged that.
You're good, though. You have lots of good ideas. These are important.
You covered all the bases.
Other ideas of how we might share our Judaism, or how our Judaism has been shared with us?
Well, there are some that go out I think doesn't Rabbi's Bible
Rabbi Fires
weekends, but he wears it all the time, right?
Yeah.
I know if I did that at work, people would ask questions, or be curious. Well, it would attract either or.
And part of that is, you have to be the kind of person that's okay with that. That's one way of sharing your Judaism, not just with the next generation, but with the world.
That's where I get a little mixed signals on it. So some people say no, you like one that is a Christian and wants to be out there. Someone that is Jewish should do the same. But then I also hear others say, no, don't do that because that makes you a target for more violence or more things, and it's one of those.
And we will talk about anti-Semitism in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Because that is a long-held fear by lots of people. I know that spoke this before. My name is Sydney. I'm named after the generation, which my dad's side of the family is still part of this, where the idea is to look British, think Yiddish. Right? You want to look as much as like the people around you and blend in so that you're not a target of anti-Semitism. But I'm kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum. I like when we show ourselves who we are and what we believe in and what we enjoy.
And then I like this one it has
meaning.
too about the tzedakah boxes.
Tzedakah boxes,
because, you typically have, well, I don't have it as much anymore because I don't do as much cash. It's more with cards, but in the case that I do have the cash and have the change lying around, I throw the spare change in the box and then either donate it for planting trees in Israel or something like that. But before we went home, I had the tzedakah box at work, and I found that even my non-Jewish coworkers were contributing to it.
I love that.
Which kind of surprised me a little bit.
And a lot of families and classrooms will have that tzedakah box, and they'll be there on, with all the kids participating, on which charity to donate to at the end of the year, the tzedakah box. I want to share two things that have had meaning to me, I think. One is just in my own childhood. One of the reasons why I was so drawn to Judaism is that for me and my family, Judaism meant joy. My family was very secular most of the time, but we all came together for Rosh Hashanah dinner or for break the fast on Yom Kippur. People would fly in from all over the country, and we would all come together for the Passover Seder. Everybody would fly out from all over the country. Started out at my Bubby and Pop-Up's house, then moved to my dining room. So my home was kind of the center of where all the family would come to, and it was, even though my mom has 3 siblings and there are always 2 who aren't talking to each other, that was the one time that everybody got along and there was laughter and all the women would hang out in the kitchen and gossip, and not gossip all the time, but would share each other's lives. And it was just such a wonderful time. And so for me, that time, that association of joy with Judaism was everything. And I saw it again this past weekend with my brother's bar mitzvah, that people, the most secular people who I spent part of the weekend arguing about, I mean, not arguing about God, but part of the weekend who spent a lot of time telling me why God was unrealistic. Those same people were the people who came up to the bima for an aliyah, or who demanded that we do candle lighting and drink wine for Friday night. And these are because there's that association of, regardless of belief, the joy of Judaism, right? That's why they keep being Jewish.
Whenever you make the latkes and share it with friends or non-friends. One of my mothers that just recently got married, we'd all go and hang around, and her now husband and I loved to get the old graters out, and we would hand grate to make the latkes.
Yeah,
Everyone else is like, no, we've done it for years, but we'll use a blender or some other way. I'm like, but that's the fun part of it.
So it's about creating that Jewish community, both, or that Jewish joy, first at home, but also, I think, in the synagogue space, right? Encouraging little small children to run through the aisles screaming with joy, screaming with distress. Usually they get brought out of the synagogue, but like having the kids stay curious in the synagogue. And like we were saying earlier, Mark, like with, treating the kids with respect and having them know that they're part of the community, giving them roles in the community, and having them just those memories of joy are more important than any specific ceremony is ever going to be.
I think we talked about it being a comfort plate. Yeah, we just had that conversation with this past weekend, making it a safe place, or letting them know that even though you're having a bad day or a bad week, or something's just not right, it's here. You can talk about it, not talk about it. We can be here in silence, or
this is a building where you're allowed to cry. You are. And that's very different than I think other places.
Yes, it really is.
And we can goof off and we can laugh, right?
It's fine.
That's
it's
things
totally
we can
fine.
do too.
There's some things I'm still adjusting to, but once I get over the initial, out of this mindset of, oh no, that's not what you're allowed to do, and I'm kind of embracing it, I really enjoy it. It's
So I love, just to close, Anita Diamant teaches 4 different ways to raise a Jewish child, and I think while this is oriented towards the home, I think it really goes along with any children that we have contact with, whether at the synagogue, whether out in the world, whether at home. First, we model Jewish learning, so we act the way Jewishly and morally that we would like for our next generation to act. To identify Jewish teachable moments, so to look for those Jewish teachable moments when we're out in the world and say, you know what this reminds me of? There's that one Torah story. Right? Tie that back in. To create positive Jewish memories, I think that's most of what we've been talking about, and then to make room for the holy. If there's a moment, let's say before we eat a meal, or when we see this gorgeous sunset, to find some way to identify that holiness and to make space for God in that space, both for ourselves and for the kids around us. All right. Well, thank you for learning with me today. I've had a whole lot of fun today, and I hope you have too. Have a wonderful week.